Welcome, Lisa Michelle Zega. This is Michelle Oliver, and we are back again with a very unscripted, authentic, transparent, spontaneous, and sometimes lack of education on the topic we're discussing, courageous conversation. And today we are actually going to have a conversation about this topic of transgender, and the disclaimer is we're just, we're not experts. Obviously, we are just interested in talking about this and in learning more about it. So both of us, I believe, are at the foundational level of like researching and everything. But we are going to share a few clips of an interview that we both watched. And I know that we've both been out on our own watching a bunch of stuff and reading as well. So we are just going to dive in, and we both of us, I know you share, we've already discussed that this is an awkward, uncomfortable, sometimes conversation, but it's very triggering for a lot of people, but it needs to be had. Yes. So welcome.
Yes.
Are you up for this today?
Deep breath. Absolutely. I mean, I am coming in deep humility. We will get into the conversation, but the part that is especially wanting the what's especially motivating me to have the conversation is as it's pertaining to young girls, adolescent girls.
So I think let's chat a little bit first, and then I could share a couple of clips if you like,
Okay.
to kind of
Yeah.
trigger us on to some more, or not trigger us, but kind of inspire us. So we're talking about this book, Irreversible Damage, which was written by Abigail Shrier, and she's been on a numerous podcasts, YouTube interviews, and I would recommend people go get her book or at least watch some of the interviews.
Yeah.
And it's really, do you want to start talking a bit about the teenage girls, and then maybe we'll take a second and I'll play a couple of clips that are just a minute long each, and then we could respond to that. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good. I'm even going to back up a little bit further and say, well, how did Michelle and I end up on this conversation? And Michelle and I were talking, and there was an article about something that happened in Michelle's hometown. And
Oh,
it
I
was
forgot. I
right.
completely forgot about that. Oh my
And
gosh, yes, share that.
it was a young girl. She's 12 years old. It all started. She calls her mom and says, Mom, may I stay after school for an art class?
Yes.
Um, the family says yes, and the art class ended up being a well, I want to say that it was said to be a safe place for youth to talk about transgender um, questions. Only in the article, this girl wasn't having those questions, but she went and she was told that she was likely queer or transgender and don't talk to your parents. And so that was uncomfortable for her. She was told it was safe to lie to her parents, that where she could expect to have the conversations about her identity were at school in a safe space. And it just escalated from there. So Michelle was telling me about the article and a conversation she had had with her son, and just stretching our own minds, um, and the willingness to have difficult conversations. So that's what spawned the topic. And that's what led me to Abigail Shrier's book.
Okay, I'm
And
going to interrupt you for
go.
a second because I think we should stay on this. I
Okay.
can't believe I forgot about this.
All right, let's do
I
it.
think let's stay on this a minute, and then I'll play the clip of Abigail to set the stage, and then we
Even
can.
better. Okay.
I can't believe I forgot. And you know who showed me the article was my sister in Hong Kong. She
Oh, that's
WhatsApped me,
right.
and I thought, this is crazy. Wellington is this little town in northern Colorado. It's an extension of Fort Collins, basically now. I mean, it's like 10 minutes from my house, north. And it's I think of it as a very conservative. We are all about agriculture and, I mean, that's what the university is known for. And there's a huge component of like tradition here.
Mhm.
So when I saw that in Wellington, it just was like, of all the places,
Yeah.
and how is she getting this news in Hong Kong? That was crazy,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
okay, so the thing that really disturbed me about that article was it felt like they were feeding her,
Yes.
grooming her. That term was used in the article, and I'll have to find it and link it in the description. But they did really feed her the notion that her home was an unsafe place, and they covered up she had no idea. She really thought she was going to art club. So the woman in the school makes a statement publicly that this is what they are doing to support this demographic. And yet the demographic is minuscule. And then I asked my son about it, and he was like, Mom, this is normal. Like, he doesn't even go to the school because he's been online and he's doing like community college, right? But he's like, yeah, these things are everywhere. Like, this is part of the normal culture. You
Yeah.
need to
Well,
wake
that's
up.
the thing is the family. So let me back up because I want to set the stage that this is not about transgender adults. This is not about bias toward a certain people
Yeah.
group. This is not about, no, this is about a time in life where identity feels very fluid for adolescents and making decisions that are not fluid, that are fixed, that have consequences of a lifetime. And that's what this article, and then also this article segued into, and the threat of parents to be turned to CPS, to
Yeah.
be reported, the school taking a stance that no, we are providing a safe place, and the idea that kids can make these life altering decisions in their youth without a parental knowledge.
Yeah.
So just the whole setup.
Yeah. So I think I want to play a couple of these clips because I think it will give some perspective.
Okay.
Also, we are not like standing here saying this is like transgender good or bad. No stance or judgment or anything on any of this except in terms of what is happening to this very vulnerable population. So let me see if I can just share my screen really quickly, and we'll just play a quick couple of clips.
Because a woman wrote to me, I had written a piece for the Wall Street Journal on transgender pronoun laws that we have in New York and California now that assign criminal and civil penalties for failing to use someone's preferred pronoun. And I pointed out that these laws are straightforwardly unconstitutional in the United States. And a reader wrote to me, she read this and she said, maybe you'll take up my issue, but I'm a mom. My daughter had no symptoms of gender dysphoria throughout, her growing up, but the gender dysphoria being the severe discomfort with biological sex. But she went off to college. She had a lot of mental health problems, And she went off to college, and with a group of girlfriends, they all decided they were transgender, and she started a course of testosterone. And I've had this problem with there are now an epidemic of these young girls who are in a lot of very real pain, deciding that gender must be their problem, and very quickly obtaining hormones and surgeries because a woman wrote to me. I had written a piece for the Wall Street Journal on.
Okay, so it's coming out across really garbled just because we're on Zoom. So I will share these clips in the description as well as the full interview and some other places that people can go. But she does go on to talk about just what you said, and she refers to it as an epidemic. And then Jordan elaborates on that and shares how these psychological epidemics have been going on forever. And I forget the name of the guy who wrote a book that he references, but basically every parent knows this is a thing, right? I mean, of course there are psychological pandemics. It's the old, okay, are you going to jump off a cliff if your friend jumps off a cliff notion?
Yes.
And every parent has been through this. Like, do you really have to have that type of shoe? Yes, because that is what gives me, connection with my group or whatever. And so she does go quite deeply into this idea. And then the notion that I forget what they call it, but Jordan was just kind of in his subtle way of being horrified that, they can make their own decisions now. You cannot deny if a teenager comes in and you are a mental health professional. And
It's not even that you can't deny it. It's a step further. And it's the idea that a mental health professional, if a person comes in questioning or wondering, they are the mental health professional, the therapist, the psychologist is yes, and they are getting on
have
board.
to affirm
yes,
it.
that
Yeah.
I'm affirming it. You are now Jane. You are now John. Just like right, but it's not it's not just talking points. Then what's happening are young girls. So Abigail Shrier quotes a statistic that's easier to come by from from Europe because of universal health care. It's harder to see in the States, but this gender dysphoria and making steps to transition is up 10,000% among girls in the last 10 years. And it's not universal. So in other words, it's not showing, oh, okay, well, there's more freedom now. So more people are coming and owning this identity that they've had all along. No, they're not being able to see that replicated in older women, 40 to 60-year-old women. It's not, it is a phenomenon that is centralized to this youthful population of young women. Okay, I'm going to calm my body down, but the things they're doing are irreversible and set up a lifetime of treatment. And a girl, I want to say as young as 15, some states it may even be younger, can begin getting hormones, have their breasts removed, things that change their reproductive system, all at a young age while they're experiencing a fluid identity they are related to as if they've made a fixed and permanent decision. It's breathtaking.
Well, yeah, I mean, what is so disturbing to me is that our attention is here. There's so much attention here on this issue when there's so many other things going on and so many other positive, helpful efforts could be made towards overall mental and physical health, financial health, social health, and so I was watching another interview today, and that anyone who searches will find this, and I can share links. But another one, a young woman who's now 23, did you see this interview where she decided that she actually wasn't transgender after taking the testosterone? And that was really fascinating too, because again, she references this idea of social pressure and just not, I mean, in the olden days, like when I was a teenager, it was like everybody is insecure and some girls just know how to fake it. Because once you got to know the cheerleaders and the people that you were envious of, they had the same problem. Like, it's just an awkward time where you're really vulnerable and like she said, Abigail says, very susceptible to being led in a direction that's going to solve the problem that has nothing to do with the actual solution that your friends are presenting. So in this interview, she was saying, I just didn't know. And every time I would say, I just doubt something, they would say, oh, well, they confirm it. If you doubt, then it's definite. You're transgender.
Yeah.
And that's crazy. That's just like,
it'd be one thing if it was
doubt,
just the name only, Michelle, but to start taking hormones at do you remember at what rate beyond your normal hormone? It's like a hormone dump
oh
that
my
was
God.
like crazy.
Did you watch that? Yes. And so the doctor allowed her to up the dose. And she said, well, how much do you want to be? She was going to prescribe the lowest dose. And she's like, well, I think I'm estrogen dominant. She didn't even check. And then she said, well, how much do you want? I mean, what if we were doing that with, it's just ludicrous.
Well,
Okay.
that's what her book found out, is that someone can self-diagnose basically.
Yes.
But I just don't know how to iterate this strong enough. The changes are of a permanent nature, like the facial structure begins changing right away. It doesn't come back. The problems escalate, requiring more and more and more medical treatment. You losing the potential of reproducing, what's happening with the breast removal. Like, these are all, they're not
Irreversible.
made from an adult conscious decision. So
Right.
this is not a conversation about like right, wrong, good,
Choice.
bad in terms of transgender. This is like,
No.
we wouldn't do this in any other area.
Exactly. How it makes no sense. Like, what is
But
going
her
on?
book is being like, Amazon, Target removed it from the shelf and as not having it be sold. Amazon wouldn't allow it to be promoted. I mean, that
It's absurd.
this seems like all parents everywhere would care about children making decisions that can't. Look, my son wanted to get a tattoo at 15. And it's like, you know
Couldn't
what?
do
That's
it.
a lifelong decision. Let's wait.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're saying, well, no, we're going to interfere with your biological makeup with requiring more and more surgeries. Like, we're going to mutilate your body.
Yeah, I know. It makes absolutely no sense. And the fact that this is why we decided to have the conversation, because why would a book like that be pulled, And this is, you'll see, I wish I could play those clips, but people can clip and go see them themselves. And Jordan is saying, I'm really nervous about this because it's like an invitation to get in big trouble, and how can that be when we're talking about our children? And any time, okay, you can't talk about religion But you can come in and make these massive, and I'm not saying we should be able to do any, I'm just saying, how is this, how does this rational?
Yeah.
But you can come in and undermine what's going on and almost make it seem like the family has caused a problem by not telling their children that there's a high possibility they may have been born, and this is the language, born into the wrong body. So isn't that interesting that that is the choice of language?
I mean, if nothing else, Michelle, from this conversation, I would want parents to just be reading what's happening with our kids, because I don't think, and this is the other thing, most of the parents and that she interviewed, these were from politically progressive families. These were from allies of the LGBTQ community. This is like, and when she went down this exploration, found that it's beyond what any of us would have ever imagined.
Mm.
And I think it's worth having a light shown on it, just from the perspective of a lay people that are parents, and the idea that it's our young girls.
Mhm.
I mean, this is, so I do want to bring up a few other remembrances. This has traditionally been something that comes up among in youth with boys,
Mhm.
and of the boys that question their gender or sexuality, 70 to 80% end up coming out of that
As they mature.
as they mature. So it's more the idea that now this is a phenomenon that is unprecedented, and choices are made with no knowledge of the parents, that are permanent. And oh, and then there was a case. Did you read about the I know, I think it was a video. It might have even been on Jordan Peterson's interview, where they brought a case. This was in Europe, and won the case from a girl who went through the transition,
Oh,
changed her mind, recognized, and the whole thing, and now has things that have been done to her body that are not able to be changed, and no one questioned her. No one helped her to see a broader perspective. We wouldn't do that. And like, isn't that the whole point, that when we're working through something, we look at options, we look at implications? This is just in any dialogue,
yeah.
so
You
that someone's
never
actually making a
assume.
free choice.
Yeah, it's actually doing the opposite, where
Yeah.
we really are, this word grooming, it's creepy, and yet it feels accurate to me. And I mean, it's almost like, and I'm not saying, again, no judgment, good or bad, wrong or right, good or evil, but we aren't, I mean, I think whatever happened to this idea of you are, I'm going to get in trouble if I say this, but you're innocent until proven guilty. It's like you are the way you're born, and until you've really taken the time to explore it. It's not, because it is irreversible. I mean, you can, you know,
Our
technically
brains aren't even
reverse
fully
it,
developed
but
to make a
yeah,
cognitive decision about something that's,
right. Yeah. And so what we should be providing is not coaching in that direction, but look, here's all the information. And what we're really missing the opportunity to do during this formative time is teach, look, health, mental health, physical health. Why are we not feeding that and trusting that, 5 years from now or 8 years from now, they will be better able to make a decision? We're not equipping them with the ability to make good decisions.
well, and that
And
was the other thing that she referenced from her book, is it's like, hey, if this was happening and kids were coming out happier and healthier, and
Yes.
all the ways that they had been blocked and suppressed, and right, and now there's a surge in positive mental health. No, that's not what
not what's
happens.
happening.
That's not what's happening. And suicide is on the rise among the young girls. So it's like the results that are promised behind the here, if we give this kind of support, if we take away all this social oppression, then you will, that is the cause of your struggle. Let's remove that. Let's have the entire society back you. And it's not having the results. So now you're doing something that lasts a lifetime and your mental health is declining.
Yes, it's serving the exact opposite purpose. And again, I mean, I have to keep saying this disclaimer, like we're not, no judgment. It's not like it's right. Not, maybe they are, but where is the required support? So when she went to Planned Parenthood and they didn't even question it, and then they actually gave it an,
Are you talking about the gal from the article? No.
no,
Which,
the girl that had the testosterone that then had she
oh,
reversed it later.
okay.
And so the other interesting thing was that they chose to give her some random diagnosis that just made it easier so that she could just, I get, apparently it sounded like, from all that I can determine, that it just made it easier for her to give her the maximum dose that she was requesting. And but where would be, I mean, I don't know what the protocol is, like if you go into Planned Parenthood for an abortion or whatever, but shouldn't there be some type of counseling? And, why are we, I don't know, again, what it would be like, but you want to explore all of these things, like, why are we doing this? Let's look at both sides, everything we've already said. It just is not responsible.
Well, that's just it, is if any one of us is going in for any kind of a surgery, anything, we're making an informed decision, you would hope. Like I went in to get my bunions removed, and the doctor said, okay, you are an active, healthy young woman. And let me tell you what's going to happen as far as you're not going to be able to work out for this amount of time. Like he was basically telling me all, and I went in as a 30-something-year-old woman. And this doctor is letting me know, okay, if you do that, these are the ramifications. This is how it will impact your life. This is what it'll look like in the future. And this is bunions. This is not something that was going to require me to have an ongoing care.
Yeah. Also, one of the largest consequences of doing this, especially if you are 15 or, 6, is still living at home with your parents, is your relationship with your parents. So not having some type of psychological conversation about that with a mental health professional who can give you both sides, but they're not allowed to do it.
They're
They
not
are
allowed to do it.
prohibited from doing that. They are prohibited and they must affirm. That's wacky. That's like me coming in and saying, I don't know, what's some wild, like I'm bipolar, or I'm going to, it's the only thing that you can actually self-diagnose, and their job is to confirm that your self-diagnosis is accurate.
Correct.
And
And
not only,
this is,
yeah, go
this
ahead.
is the thing.
This is crazy.
Because here's the thing. When asked about, well, okay, but we've seen historically, this is from her, this isn't something I'd studied. They said, okay, we've looked at transgender for 100 years.
Hmm.
And it's in that time frame that we've been able to see that people that have initially questioned 70 to 80% change their mind.
Right.
Hey, so then they say, all right, well, that is a fluid gender identity. Fluid, meaning it changes, it fluctuates. But if the medical health professionals are withholding that information, and then they're agreeing and affirming, and then they're giving a procedure that has all kinds of implications, and we're not just talking about the implications of, okay, reproductive, like it's medical
Psychological.
complications
Yes.
and psychological struggles. And then when
And
and there,
social, I mean,
and there's so many cases now where someone in their young 20s is like, I made a mistake.
and
And
think of it like in any other, sorry to jump over you, but
no, please
in
do.
any other situation, this would be considered criminal, right? Like, just think of it like, oh, you
And that's what happened in
had-
the courts in Britain. They did call it criminal. They
it
said,
is.
no, it is.
It absolutely is. It's like, oh my gosh, you did. So imagine some case where they prescribe a drug because the client comes in or the patient comes in and says, I think I have such and such. And then I'm not familiar enough because I don't go to doctors ever. So, but they come in and they say, I think I have this malady. And the doctor says, okay, yes, you do. How much of this drug would you like me to prescribe to you? You want some oxycodone? Okay, how much would you like?
Yeah.
And they say, please give me the max. And then the patient dies and that would be considered criminal.
Malpractice. And yet this is now what medical
It's
health professionals are being held accountable to do.
Yeah, it's required, not only encouraged, it's the law.
So
I'm
parents
feeling
like this
very
little
masculine today. Here, how much testosterone would you like? You know, can you, God, it's crazy.
the person in your town, the family,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
they were like the parents were criminalized. The
I
parents
know
could
it.
not get recourse anywhere. Not with the school
Crazy.
system. They went to law. And so that is just like the idea that we can be criminalized even seeking to support our child in thinking it through. And these are parents that, like, a lot of the parents that she interviewed, they were progressive. This is not whatever white, conservative, oppressive,
Yeah.
male, whatever,
No.
you know, that the dialogue is in the mainstream. It's like, but this isn't what we're talking about. And the reason that I'm like, look, as uneducated about all the factors as I am, I can recognize a few things that are like, hey, can we please sound an alarm on behalf of young girls?
Exactly.
Can we sound an alarm?
Think of it like this. If every young girl, let's say with all the Instagram, social media, because we know, and they are really talking about this. Actually, I know I'm all over the place here, but the young woman who was 23, to your point, early 20s, where she decided I made a mistake, she attributed her mental, emotional stability that allowed her to make that decision to be that she withdrew from social media and she no longer had that input. And then when she went back on social, all of the people that she'd befriended, of course, dissed her because, you know, now she went back on her commitment to being transgender. So all of that is just typical social baloney, right?
And
So
there's so much support for you to make the choice, but
right.
if you change your mind.
Exactly. So imagine if these young girls come up and they say, all of the girls on Instagram have this certain size breast. Okay. or it could be anything, but we're going to use breasts because that's a thing. So, and they go to the doctor and they say, everyone on Instagram says that I will be more whatever, like I need this in order to be more fully myself, whatever that is, because that's what we're talking about, is these girls saying, this is who, and Jordan addresses this, which I did want to mention earlier, that he's like, this is the only thing that you can self-prescribe, self-diagnose, and it's about how you feel about who you are in a fluid environment. So you might change your mind tomorrow and you can go in and get a different diagnosis and a different prescription. So what if the girls were doing that with their breasts or just random anything?
But once they start
Families
the
would be going
hormones,
crazy.
that's what freaked me out, is once they start the hormone regimen, they
Yeah.
can't just stop it. Even they can't just stop. Like if I change my mind tomorrow, there are ramifications from the first dose.
Right.
And it is so, I wish I would have written down the number of the multiplication of what it is to a biological dose of hormones. And we don't have studies, which at this day and age, there's other things in the media that there's no concern over ramifications. But we, the people, I mean, there does seem to be an agenda. Why would I say that? Why the heck would something that is just a journalist reporting get banned like this? Like, this is not a book that she had no skin in the game in terms of out to prove a point. She had parents asking to take a stand who couldn't get someone to represent what they were
Exactly.
experiencing.
No journalist would take it on. And that's why you guys should go watch at least that interview and others too, if you're
There-
interested at all, because the more we can get the conversation out there, and the parents are blindsided.
Yeah, that's just it.
Typically, I mean, they're like,
I felt
"Wait a minute."
blindsided.
Yeah.
I mean, having this conversation, I'm fairly impassioned, but I will say I felt blindsided. Like there's just certain things we're not thinking about until it comes to our front door. So the idea that we've got an epidemic of young girls making decisions for their body that have lifelong ramifications, they can't be taken back. And just as a mama, this isn't like me as a social activist. This is me as a mom saying, hey parents, I just can't see, I just can't see this. If we understood the implications, people staying quiet, I just can't.
Um, the last thing that I really want to say is that I found it interesting that this has been studied for many, many, many years, this idea of a psychological pandemic,
Oh yeah.
and the correlation between that and young teenage girls. So initially, like, you got to watch the video, because Abigail says, yeah, girls are known to do this. They will sacrifice who they are. And women like to replay and replay and replay these notions until it becomes a culture. And then, the girls all buy in. And we all know this. Any woman who's ever been a teenager knows you've been subjected to this. But this is for another conversation, but I want to mention it because it keeps coming to my awareness that women do this. We continue to do this with different aspects of trauma and victimization. And so I want to plant that seed for another conversation, because I think it would be fascinating, especially now that I know there's all this scientific evidence that we do this. And so look at how that changes your life forever.
Yeah. Well, and Michelle, I know I don't want to detract from what you're saying, but I do want people to know that one of the reasons this has so much play is they brought it into the civil rights realm in terms of what has steam behind or energy behind this idea. And oh, that another thing I think is worthy of noting, these are middle class white girls that you see this on the rise, because we do live in a culture that glorifies victimization, where your wounds are your identity. And so what does a white middle class girl do if she's not black, she's not poor, she's not, but gender, now she too can join the civil rights march for, and so to circle back to your point, yes, we as women do that. They reference that. This is why getting a bunch of women together who are struggling with anorexia can be dangerous, because women will end up competing for who's the best anorexic.
Oh my
And
God, this is so disturbing. That's a whole nother conversation I really want to
it's
have.
all a whole another
I mean,
conversation.
that's and again, another disclaimer again and again and again, we're not saying that this is not a real issue. We're just saying give a breath and give support and some space, and let's talk about it. But
yeah,
but what hit me when you said that is, what is the ultimate victimization? Is to be born into the wrong body. I mean, can you just say like, oh my God, I'm such a victim. I was born into the wrong body. And I'm not making fun. Okay. I'm just saying, if this is a real tendency for girls to fall into these, gosh, ladies, we know this is a thing. Yeah, so maybe let's give some space to explore before we dive in and say, so, do something where the consequences are quite dramatic.
and let's protect our youth to make decisions when they are grown and I'm all for supporting people that are exploring all the
Yeah,
things,
drink.
all the love, all the
Yeah.
acceptance, all the being together, but to be making decisions that the implications are permanent. And it's not just that they're permanent, it's also that they create other health struggles to navigate, even just going
Okay.
through I'm going to hold and just, yeah, like you said, allow some space and some breathing room. I am confident much of what we said could be misconstrued,
Yeah,
obviously.
I don't care.
And it's,
Anyone can go educate themselves. We just wanted to, and obviously this is a very, I mean, it's not like we've been practicing or anything. Like, we're just having a conversation about it because we want you to have a conversation about it.
please.
This enters our world, and it's our girls we're talking
This is,
about.
yeah, this are girls.
Well, thank you for being brave, because I guess we're being brave. It doesn't feel brave to me or you, I know, but
Yeah, I think people only call it brave if it ends up having these dire ramifications, which conversations can, and it's a needed conversation regardless.
it certainly leaves me baffled.
Yeah.
And this too, I mean, what we really, I have to say this one last thing, okay? Because at the end of the day, we want to have agency over our lives. And maybe we're asking the wrong questions about what that means, where it's really going to impact us. And maybe our girls, our young people are just like us, and they really are just searching for the truth about what they are capable of experiencing in this life. And it almost feels like a distraction.
Wow. Michelle, the temptation, I think, in all human suffering is to instead of navigate what's going on in here, to externalize it and make it out there. And it just seems like this whole gender thing, it's like I'm doing something outside of me. But what about just the heart that needs to be witnessed as you navigate this season of life and
Yeah.
make a decision when it's more informed? And until then, we just create a place of safety and support and curiosity and exploration and compassion, and we
Like
do
you
that to give
would
what,
with anything else with your
like,
kids. Like anytime they want to do anything and you help them create a greater understanding prior to making a decision about anything,
yeah.
about anything.
And maybe because we're living in such a polarized society, maybe our kids aren't trusting because we're not having some of these wise, curious, compassionate, creative conversations in broader culture. And now what's at stake is our children's bodies. And it's like, I think maybe this is time for pause for us to come together as a community in loving one another and what that means.
Talking and starting with a conversation, a courageous conversation,
Yeah.
starting that begins with curiosity,
Yeah.
courage, and creativity. Okay,
Yeah.
so on that note, that was a quick hour.
Yeah. It's so fast.
I know.
They always are.
It's so fun to be back with you though, and I appreciate you. And we will be having many more of these. And if anyone watches this and has a topic that you are curious about and want us to be courageous about, then put it in the comments and we will jump all over it, right? We'll
Yes.
do it.
Yes, we will.
Yes.
Woo!
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Until
you.
next time.
Until next time, ciao for now. Love
Ciao
you.
for now.
Bye.
Love you
Love the
too.
world.
Bye.
Love you all. Bye.